Okay, folks, welcome to Cyberfrog 2 REKT Panels, Part 1. This is, of course, an examination of Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog REKT Planet, which is the sequel to Cyberfrog Bloodhoney. Ethan Van Sciver, of course, is the quote-unquote leader of Comicsgate, the Human Sunbeam, and he is a 30-plus year veteran of the comics industry, having drawn such famous runs as Green Lantern Rebirth, Flash Rebirth, and also notably his own creator-owned property, Cyberfrog, largely for Harris Comics back in the 90s. Now, those old stories of Cyberfrog are largely defunct. He has rebooted the continuity of Cyberfrog in his crowdfunded endeavor Bloodhoney under his own self-published imprint, All Caps Comics. And so Cyberfrog Bloodhoney is really the only Cyberfrog material that's out there now that is canonical. And I'm going to go ahead and recap that issue because it is the prequel to REKT Planet. And so you kind of need to know what happened beforehand, what happened before REKT Planet. So spoilers abound. If you haven't read Bloodhoney, you might want to go ahead and pick up a copy and then come back later. But I'm going to go ahead and get into the meat of the story, which basically gives Cyberfrog's origin. Cybernetic starship Chelsyn lands on Earth in the New Jersey Pine Barrens and merges the twin embryo she carries with the DNA of a tree frog and a salamander, instead of the DNA of the Boy Scouts that were supposed to be there. So the idea was to create cybernetic humans, but because there were no humans around, Chelsyn had to settle for the local fauna. Trick Ron, aka Cyberfrog, can be cybernetically augmented remotely by Chelsyn to combat whatever threat arises, including the interstellar threat of the Vispas, a race of murder hornets she was specifically sent to Earth to thwart. Daduronron, aka Salamandroid, is not augmentable, but is strong and durable and intended to be his brother's protector. So the idea is Cyberfrog is going to protect the planet from the Vispas, and Salamandroid is there to protect Cyberfrog while he's doing his job. Cyberfrog and Salamandroid are largely shunned by human society. I mean, my goodness, they're practically like robot monsters, you would kind of look at them like. But they are befriended by a young girl, Heather Swain, who provides them with food and friendship. Now, when the Vispas do finally invade, Chelsyn is captured, and an unaugmented Cyberfrog is gravely injured. His wounds put him into automatic suspended animation. We don't know what happens to Salamandroid. Cyberfrog eventually awakens from hibernation and is stunned to see that the Vispas have apparently taken over the world. He immediately goes looking for Heather Swain based on a signal put out by a tracker he once gave her, and importantly, a Vispas hornet follows him. On the way to Heather, Cyberfrog encounters the preteen girl Lily Owen, who is out in the forest looking for her missing father. To his shock, Cyberfrog learns Lily is Heather Swain's daughter. He has been out of commission for 20 years. And so the story basically starts to pick up from then. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the first 3 pages of REKT Planet and take a look at some minor issues there. First, there's a minor typo on the first page, where you have Cyberfrog's narration, "The Vispas can have this world, and I hope they choke on it." There really should be a comma after world, and this is a minor thing, but you know, it's the first page. It's your first impression. And really, if you want to lock down any particular page, the first page should be it. You want to give the reader the idea that there are not going to be mistakes in this book. The last thing you want is anything major or minor on the first page to let the reader know that the quality is not going to be 100%. So do take care to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. Now, the first 2 pages of REKT Planet tell us, in a prologue, that 1 month from now, Cyberfrog, wounded and in bad shape, will be cradled, helpless in Heather's arms. Well, there's echoes of Bloodhoney's prologue here, because at the beginning of Bloodhoney, Chelsyn forewarns the reader that she has failed in her mission to protect Earth from the Vispas. And so this is almost a repetition of how Bloodhoney was playing out. It's kind of a bummer, too, because if you've just seen the Earth be taken over by the Vispas, and now that Cyberfrog is back, you're like, what's going to happen now? You kind of want to have a little bit of hope, and yet this 2-page prologue is automatically telling us, don't get your hopes up. It's only going to get worse. Yes, everything sucks, and Cyberfrog is back, but don't look at that as necessarily being, we're saved. And the last thing is, the 3rd page recaps Cyberfrog's awakening from hibernation and his departure to find Heather, only it's told from the Vispa's point of view. I'm actually not going to complain about that. I was a little bit concerned about kind of the Rashomon effect here, where you're telling the same story from different perspectives. But because this is such a short recap, and because it's told from this entirely other perspective, you're kind of on the outside looking in with the Vespas as Cyberfrog reawakens, it actually does work. It's a sufficiently different perspective that it's not feeling repetitious to see the same scene played over again. Normally, I'm kind of like, do I have to see the same page? I already know this information. But to see it from so alien a perspective makes that particular thing work. So, looking at the first 3 pages, I mean, if you look at my minor complaints here, you don't get the impression that there is a lot wrong with the book. And it actually made me kind of hopeful, like, all right, we're about to dive into the story, and let's see what happens. And then comes page 4, because page 4 has 3 different problems on it. 3 or 4, counting how we kind of handle the second, but let's just look at it as, well, actually, I'm thinking of page 5. So page 4 itself has 3 different problems on it. The first one has to do with the art, and here's a technique that I wish that more modern comic book artists would get away from, and it's called panel layering. And this is where you have a panel sitting on top of other panels, instead of the standard structure where you just have a comic book panel, followed by another panel, followed by another panel, followed by another panel. And the artists think that they're being cute by doing this. They think they're adding something. They think they're adding dimensions on it. But there's 2 problems here, one of which is you always wonder what's behind the panel. And, even if there's no useful information behind the panel, your reader is always going to wonder what's back there. So you're causing an unnecessary distraction for the reader. The other thing that's a problem here is that Ethan's chosen the most uninteresting panel to layer on top of the others. That's an establishing shot in the first panel. There is no freaking reason why that panel needs to be on top of the others. What really could have happened is you just basically give us a normal top panel followed by the 3 other panels. There's no reason for this to have been a layered shot and confuse the reader in any way, shape, or form. I mean, yeah, you know what order you're supposed to read the panels in, but why is this particular panel layered on top of the others? Turns out there's just no reason other than to make it seem cutesy-poo as opposed to a regular flat panel set. But you know what? Flat panel sets tell the story in a much more concise, understandable, and less confusing form. When comic book readers encounter a page, they are expecting that page to follow certain rules, which is you have panels on it. Those panels are generally separated by borders, and then you can read top down, left to right. And you don't, when you avoid throwing in tricks like this, you allow the reader to not have to work harder to read your story. You can just let the reader relax and immerse himself in the story. So avoid these little tricks whenever you can. The next problem has to do with the dialogue, and the dialogue here has some minor problems and then a larger thematic issue. And I have to, because it's so small on the page, I'm going to go ahead and reprint it here. In panel 1, after finding out that Lily is out in the forest without Heather Swain, her mother, Cyberfrog says, "Yeah? What are you wandering in the woods without her for?" "Dude, I'm wearing red like I'm supposed to. Hop up off my back. Not everyone needs to constantly be connected to their mom." Huh. I do. Why are you supposed to wear red? It's one of the rules. Stay in the trees, stay near the smoke, never panic, and always wear red. The so-called murder hornets can't see us when we wear red. We're invisible to them. They might as well be invisible to me, too. I've never seen one. Now, there's some minor issues here, like, for example, when Lily says, hop up off my back. You've got two different prepositions in there. Hop up off my back? All you have to say is hop off my back, and that's just cleaner. Then we've got the problem of a split infinitive. To constantly be connected, you want to keep the preposition and the verb together in an infinitive. So rearrange those words to be constantly connected. And then last but not least, we have a lack of emphasis. These rules are basically the rules that have been established by humanity to make sure that they stay alive. These are, these are the things you never disobey. And so you want to put emphasis on those words. They're hard and fast rules, and you want to ingrain them into the reader's mind so that the reader, starts wondering, okay, how do I live in this new world where the Vispas rule? Well, I have to live according to these rules. The other problem is that there is a thematic grouping that gets missed here. You've got two different conversations really going on. One has to do with the fact that Lily is not with her mother. The other has to do with the fact of she's wearing red. And the dialogue here should be rearranged in a way to make one grouping appear after the other instead of it being a mixture. So the dialogue should flow better if it's more like this. Yeah? What are you wandering in the woods without her for? Dude, hop off my back. Not everyone needs to be constantly connected to their mom. I do. Besides, I'm wearing red like I'm supposed to. Why are you supposed to wear red? It's one of the rules. Stay in the trees, stay near the smoke, never panic, and always wear red. So-called murder hornets and yada yada. But you get the idea that now you've got one idea in the fact that Lily is separated from her mom, and then another idea about wearing red and obeying the rules. So those are two concepts that the reader needs to absorb, one of which being, Lily is alone, and also Cyberfrog is alone. He's missing his connection with Chell Sin, who has been captured by the Vispas. And then you've got this whole thing about wearing red and adapting to life under the Vispas by following these rules. Those are two separate concepts, and you want the reader to be able to absorb each of those in turn, as opposed to having to, absorb them all as a confused kind of glop of dialogue. And then the last part has, this is one of my favorite things that Ethan kind of just loves to do, and it's called panel breaking. And panel breaking is when you let your art extend beyond the borders of the panel. And sometimes that makes sense. Most of the time it does not. Here, it does not. Why? Because there's no useful information. That is in the top of Cyberfrog's head, the top of Lily's head, the extra bit of extended spines from Cyberfrog's shoulder. There's no reason the reader needs to see any of that. And so to keep the reader's eyes from having to wonder, okay, is this significant in some way? Is the, he's not following the general rule of just keeping everything within the panel borders. Is that supposed to signify something to me? Because again, every time you go outside of the basic rules that a comic book reader is used to, you throw that reader off a little and make that reader wonder, is there something here I'm supposed to be picking up on? Here, there's no reason for any of this particular information. Just get rid of it. You have practically the same scene. You just are missing a little bit of artwork. And we'll live without that because it's practically zero information in that artwork that got cut off. And if you're really, really just that hell-bent on putting all that artwork in, draw the damn scene smaller so that it all fits into the same panel. You have control as an artist to fit all your art where it needs to go. So then we find out, okay, Froggy, and then we're going to see the reunion scene. And page 5 is a page that broke my heart twice. And let me explain how that is. And for one thing, it has nothing to do with the fact that we're doing that goddamn panel layering again. You know, we don't need this. There's no reason why the most unimportant shot on the page is layered over the other panels. So just put them in a normal panel sequence and let the reader enjoy the scene as it is. What really broke my heart was when Ethan Van Sciver showed me how he had adapted this page. This was the one and only time that I've ever been on his show. He actually invited me on because I had made a couple of suggestions on Twitter, back when I had Twitter, to correct a couple of things about his REKT Planet preview. And this was one of the pages I told him he needed to correct. And the problem was with some dialogue that Heather was saying. She was saying originally something like, "I don't believe it. What? Where? How?" And it was like, she's just kind of stuttering and saying, and like dumping, word salad. And I was like, no, don't do that. Have her say something, real. And then in this case, there was also some dialogue, extra dialogue at the bottom, as opposed to just this Lily, this is my friend Trick Ron. Now, I don't think I actually pointed anything out about that necessarily, but when I saw how he had pared it down and he had given us just this scene in all of its raw emotion, I felt my heart break and my eyes just teared up because it was such a raw scene. The reconnection of this pair after 20 years of separation, at least from her perspective. From his perspective, it hasn't been that long. But to see them together again, it really brought tears to my eyes in a way that comic books rarely do. And I told him at the time that this page, this is great now. This is a heartbreaker of a page. This is fantastic. He really did a bang-up job. Now, the reason my heart broke a second time is that I knew this page was coming in the book when I was reading it. But for some reason, my heart didn't break the way that it did before. Instead, it broke in the sense that I wasn't getting the same emotion out of this page as I did before, and I couldn't understand why. I don't think it was the novelty of it. And then I'm looking around on the page like, why is it that I am not feeling it the way that I felt it all the way back then? And now I don't know if I just didn't notice this piece of dialogue or if it wasn't there originally. But in either case, it is this damn yep. This yep that Lily issues. And it's a dismissive yep. It's an unimpressed yep. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, you just drained all of the emotion out of this scene, because now we're having to, with that piece of dialogue, we're having to put ourselves in Lily's head and look at this scene with all the jadedness of a child who doesn't care, who has other priorities. And it sucks so bad. And it not only that, but it makes us hate the kid. Because she is not appreciating this scene for all that it is. And I know, and this is talking directly to Ethan here, I know you're going to create a new version of REKT Planet when, I don't know if it's after Dark Harvest, or if it's in the Dark Harvest campaign, or if it's in the Cyberfrog Red Extermination campaign, that you have basically said you're going to have a collected edition of BLOODHONEY plus REKT Planet. And I know that you like to do the George Lucas thing and correct scenes along the way. Correct this one. Get rid of Lily's dialogue balloon. Get rid of it. We don't need it. It doesn't add anything. Just allow this scene to overpower the reader with the sheer emotion of their reunion. Give the reader that. The next scene on page 6 is dismissive enough from Lily's point of view. She's like, well, I'd love to stay and catch up, but I gotta go. Just let us have the raw emotion in the first scene and let page 6 take care of the rest. So, here is the irony of these REKT panels, and I had a lot more that I wanted to cover in this one video, but at this point I think I'm at a pretty good stopping point, so I'm going to stop here and go into the next sequence in the next video, which will be REKT Panels 2. But I do want to point out one very important piece of irony connected to the REKT panels that we've seen so far. And that piece of irony is that this is not the first time that we've seen all of these different kinds of errors in a comic book. For example, when we look at the panel layering error, and we see that this should really have been like this, a normal panel layout. Where have we seen that before? Alpha Core number 1. Here we have a sequence where Joe Bennett has been doing some panel layering and really shouldn't have been, and it needs to be extended out so that the panels are just plain sequential. Now, how about keeping thematic elements in two different panels, like in this case where really we need that little yep by Lily removed so that we can have all of the emotion of their reunion in one scene hitting the reader pure, and then the rest of it can be complexified with her, dismissive attitude toward it. Where have we seen that before? And the same thing goes for this grouping of language about, where is Heather? Why aren't you with your mother? Versus, why are you wearing red? Well, we've seen that in Alpha Core number 1 also. We saw it in this pair of panels where Galvin is confronting the police, and in the first panel, we see the police trying to de-escalate. And then in the second panel, we see Galvin at first seeming to accept the de-escalation, but then reversing himself. But the panel itself shows only escalation. So what really should have happened here is that all of the de-escalation language should have been confined to the first panel, so that only escalation language was in the second panel. And that way, we would have the thematic groupings that the reader would need to understand and digest each panel individually. And then last but not least, we have the panel breakage, where we have this unnecessary information creeping out of the panel borders and, nearly affecting the other panels, when we didn't need that at all. Well, where have we seen stuff like that before? Alpha Core number 1. You've got Joe Bennett taking Brian Solari's elbow and digging it down into the lower panel, which, there's a problem with panel layering there too. But just looking at the elbow, we don't need his elbow in that panel. All we need is to just see Brian Solari flying away and then let the other panels stand on their own. So here's the question that I really want Ethan Van Sciver to take away from all of the critique that I've done. How can you claim Comicsgate is superior to Rippaverse, which is something that he has been doing up and down these last few weeks? How do you complain that books like Cyberfrog, that books like Inglorious Rex, that books like Graveyard Shift, and I haven't reviewed those, so I don't know if they're all of the same quality, but Ethan Van Sciver is pretty much synonymous with Comicsgate, so you would think that his quality level is going to be something that's across the board to their quality levels. How can you claim Comicsgate is superior to Rippaverse if you both make all the same mistakes? You have to up your game if you want to compete with Eric July. Not because Eric July is any better, but because you're not any better. Not so far. You're going to have to think about that and think about it seriously. So that is all for this segment of Cyberfrog 2 REKT Panels. When we get into Cyberfrog 2 REKT Panels Part 2, we're going to see Cyberfrog's combat with one of the Murder Hornets, aforementioned, and we'll see all the elements that I can pick out of that. So thank you very much for watching. I'm Mike Partika. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and get notifications, if you will, for the next video in this series and other videos of mine. And I will talk to you later.